For question number 7, I have to take a look at what I'm looking for. I'm looking for this degrees right here, and I'm given this degrees right here. The second thing that I'm going to look for is if I have the sides that are opposite of those two angles. The side opposite of x is 32, and the side opposite of 50 degrees is 40. So since I have two angles and the two sides opposite of those angles, and only one of those four is a variable, I'm going to use the law of sines. The law of sine says that I'm going to use the sine of one of the degrees. Let's use 50 first. So the sine of 50 over the side opposite it, which is 40, is going to equal the sine of x over the side opposite it, which is 32. Once you have two fractions that equal each other, to solve for x, you can cross multiply. So I'm going to have 40 times the sine of x is going to equal 32 times the sine of 50. If you were going to solve this problem, the next step would be to divide both sides by 40 and then take the sine inverse. So my final step would be the sine inverse of 32 times the sine of 50 divided by 40. In this case, the problem says do not solve it, so I'm not really looking for an answer. I would just be looking for the fact that you can set up the ratios correctly. Question number 11 asks us to find the missing dimensions of the triangle. If there's 180 degrees in a triangle, and if you know that that is 138 degrees and the bottom left is 20 degrees, you also know that this degrees angle F is going to be 22 degrees. The hard part in this case is figuring out what DE is, so let's just go ahead and call it little f. Now with this, I have 3 degrees and I have two sides. I'm only looking for one of the sides, so you can use whichever you want. You can use the sine rule or you can use the cosine rule. I'm going to use the sine rule. So the 2 degrees I'm going to use are 22 and 20. So I'm going to do the sine of 22 over f, and that's going to equal the sine of 20 over 8. And remember, I'm getting f and 8 because they have to be the sides across from that. So across from 22 degrees is f, and across from 20 degrees is 8. Now that I have two fractions equaling each other, you can cross multiply. So I'm going to get f times the sine of 20 is going to equal 8 times the sine of 22. Now I'm trying to get the variable by itself, so I'm just trying to get this f right here by itself. The thing that's in its way is the sine of 20. F is being multiplied by the sine of 20, so in order to get f by itself, I have to divide by the sine of 20. Divide both sides by the sine of 20. Then you can put all of this into your calculator. You can put this whole thing into your calculator. 8 times the sine of 22 divided by the sine of 20, and you will end up with f is equal to about 8.76. Question number 12 is a little bit more tricky. Let's take a look at what we have. They give us one angle and then they give us two sides. But the problem here is that 120 is my degrees, but they don't give me the side across from it. I'm trying to find the measure of angle C, so this degrees right here. So if I was going to set this ratio up right now, I would have the sine of angle C over 15, and that would have to equal the sine of 120 over lowercase b. And again, I cannot solve this because I have a variable right here and a variable right here. As soon as I have two separate variables, you can't solve this. So the next step of this equation is to figure out what this length b is. And I can figure out what that b is, and as soon as I figure out the length of AC, or the length of b, then I can go ahead and solve for c. To figure out what b is, I'm going to have my two opposites. So here I have 120. Opposite of 120 is b. So those are going to be my two ends. So I'm going to have b squared is equal to something squared plus something squared minus 2 times something times the cosine of 120 degrees. The two other sides that I'm going to use are 15 and 19, so I have 15 squared plus 19 squared minus 2 times 15 times 19. Whenever you have just the variable on the left-hand side, go ahead and put all of this into your calculator at once. So put 15 squared plus 19 squared minus 2 times 15 times 19 times the cosine of 120. Put all of that into your calculator at once and put enter. When you do that, you get b squared is going to equal 29 or 871. And then to get b by itself, you have to take the square root. So take the square root of both of them, and you get b is equal to 30. Once you know that b is equal to 30, you can substitute it in for our original equation. So now I'm going to erase b and put in 30. So now I can cross multiply. I have 30 times the sine of c is equal to 15 times the sine of 120. To get c by itself, the first thing I have to do is divide both sides by 30. So divide both sides by 30. That's going to cross that out. And then the last thing I have to do is take the sine inverse of both sides. So go ahead and put in your calculator all at once the sine inverse of 15 times the sine of 120, all of that divided by 30, and you should get 26.1. For question number 14, this one's a little bit different. It says find f to the nearest whole number. One of the big signs that tells me I'm going to be using the cosine rule is the first thing, I only have 1 degrees. The next reason I know I'm going to use the cosine rule is that they give me or ask me for all 3 sides. So if you only have 1 angle and 3 sides, you're usually going to use the cosine rule. So let's start with my bookends, or the end of my equation. Here's 36 degrees, and opposite of 36 is 62. As soon as you have that one pair, that one set of opposite sides and angles, those are going to be your bookends. So I'm going to have 62 squared is going to equal something squared plus something squared minus 2 times something times the cosine of 36. And again, these are going to be my two ends, 62 and 36 degrees. So now I can fill in the rest. The other 2 sides that I didn't use were f and 71 and f and 71. Once I start simplifying this, I get 3,844 is equal to 5,041 plus f squared minus f times 142 times the cosine of 36. The next step is that I can subtract 5,041 from both sides, subtract 5,041. On the left side, I get negative 1,197 is going to be equal to f squared minus 115f. And I got 115f just because I can put all of this in my calculator. You can put 142 times the cosine of 36, and that's going to give you negative 115. And then my f is just going to stay there. Once you get to this point, there's not much you can do. You can either use the quadratic formula or you can solve for it, but in this case, this is how I want you to leave your answer. You can just leave it as negative 1,197 is equal to f squared minus 115f. For a question, it says find x to the nearest whole number. Let's take a look at what we have. They give me one angle, which is 148, and they also give me the side opposite of that one angle. I don't have any other angles in here, so I'm probably going to use the cosine rule. And again, I know that because I have one angle and they give me the side across from it. So I'm going to have 25 squared is going to be equal to something squared plus the other side squared minus 2 times one side times the other side times the cosine of 148. Once I set up my 2 bookends, then I can use everything else. I have 12 and x, so I'm going to substitute. That's 12, that's x, this is 12, this is x. And again, this is going to be one of those questions like number 14, where we can't solve the whole thing because we have a variable here, and we have an x squared on this side, and we have an x right here.